Oh! Hi friends, welcome to the bestest video ever that you're going to watch about shutter drag. Today we're going to be looking at some photos that involve shutter drag. And what that means is it's when you drag your shutter. And the effect is called shutter drag. Let's begin. First we're going to look at this one. And this is a good standard shutter drag the cars in traffic photo. We see that the cars close to us are dragged and the cars far from us are undragged. Because of that, what happens is there's a certain energy that's introduced into this photo. This is a lovely photo. I also think the colors are fantastic. I like how when you look at the back of the photo and then you move towards the bottom slash close part of the photo, you see the cars begin to drag more and more. I like to think about how photos would look and feel if they were executed in a different way. And in this case, if the shutter drag wasn't here, what would happen? Well, we would have a pretty solid photo still. We would have a pretty scene. We would have the night energy. The lights are dramatic and fun, but there's an extra sauce that's added to this photo because the cars are being blurred. You get a sense of city metro movement and activity, fun stuff. At night, your shutter speed will naturally be slower, which would create this type of effect. In the daytime, you would have to adjust other settings in order to create this effect, to get your shutter speed slow enough to create this type of effect. But this is a beautiful photo. I love the lighting, I love the tones, love the shutter drag. 5 stars. Here's our next photo. For these videos, I like to find different applications for a technique, how you can use a shutter drag differently. And in this case, we see a bit of a different application. In the previous one, we saw that cars were able to be blurred and to introduce a sense of movement and energy because of that. Well, in this case, we have the shutter drag being put into a place where it's causing the raindrops to drag just a little bit, and that accentuates the rain. If the shutter speed was very fast, if the shutter went pop up, then you would end up with a photo where the rain was not so prominent. But in this case, it's bop bop, right? And because of that, we have the rain dragging, and it really accentuates this feeling of being in a semi-torrential downpour walking your bike through a town. You really feel the rain in this as much as you see it. Now, one of the things that I've realized is that if you drag your shutter too much when you're photographing rain, the rain actually de-accentuates itself again in the other direction. So there's a sweet spot that you can find for photographing rain, dragging the shutter so that you can create these nice prominent streaks, almost like a texture in the image. I love this shot. I love how you have a story of this fellow walking through the rain. You have the lights on the truck in the distance lighting up this person, really helping out this scene a lot. Very nice. Without the truck and the lights being placed the way that they are, this scene would run the risk of being very blue. In this case, we have a very pleasant lighting situation. The headlights are pointing towards our subject, and that accentuates the subject. That accentuates the subject. Very beautiful photo. I love the way it feels. Next, we have this photo of a very snowy scene. Instead of dragging the rain, we're dragging the snow. The snow is actually going sideways here, so we get a sense for what the conditions were probably like. Once again, a scene that you feel as much as you see. And I love the use of a subject, person in the distance with their dog. Without the subject, the photo would be nice. It'd be pleasant for sure. It'd still be very beautiful, but the subject really helps the photo out. I'm going to sip my tea to this photo. Now, it's already getting a little bit too cool. And that's a problem because looking at this photo, my insides are cooling because there's snow. And it's actually a condition. When I see cold things, it makes me cold. So I can't watch any shows about the Arctic because I actually get hypothermia on my couch. It's very sad. You don't want to see my toes. But once again, and just like the last photo, the shutter drag is actually very helpful and important for this photo to establish the environment that we're in and really get a sense for what it would feel like to stand there. In this case, you would have snow pelting the right side of your body, and that's fun. And you want that to be in a photo, unless you have my condition. Now here's a different interesting use of shutter drag. We have a street performer who is playing the violin, and we have a person going by. This photo is beautiful and so well executed, and probably involved a fair bit of luck, because you can actually see the case for the violin with money inside of it. That's spectacular. It's an extra bit of context for this photo, and it's so spectacular that I thought that this could have been manipulated in some way. But maybe the photographer knew that people might not believe this photo. There's a video in the Instagram post as well of the person actually taking these shots, and you can see in one of the frames, it looks like it's this frame, and it seems like you can actually see the money in that shot as well. So this is spectacular. Here, even our subject is blurred a little bit. Once again, you're getting this city movement, electric energy vibe to things. The subject is only blurred enough to give that sense, but not too much to where it just becomes abstract. There is a person moving by in the foreground, once again establishing this energy, and that's great. This takes a scene and a photo that could have been interesting and makes it more interesting by layering a subframe of a blurred individual. And because of that, the photo comes alive in a different way, and I think it's fantastic. I love the grade on it. It's black and white, stark, grainy. I like the wood texture in the background. Very nice. In this one, we have a very subtle but pleasant use of shutter drag. The shutter drag is primarily seen in the background on the train that's coming through. And once again, just adds a sense of energy, also makes the background a bit more engaging, separates the subject from the background a little bit. Anytime you drag the background, it's another way to separate the subject from the background, kind of like what you would do with the shallow depth of field. You have some extra things going on in the background inside the train that could potentially distract from the very interesting subject here. It would have worked for sure, but it helps the photo a little bit more to have that here. So the shutter drag is by no means the star of this photo. It is a helper. And the interesting thing in terms of settings is figuring out the right shutter speed to allow the subject to be sharp or sharp enough, but have the train still be blurring. And then also it's interesting to think about how far could we push it? How slow could we make the shutter speed? How much could we blur the train in the background and still have a sharp subject? Interesting question. I suppose it depends on how fast to do it. Now in this next one, we have an incredibly sharp photo with absolutely no shutter drag whatsoever. And we have a picture of there's a person there, and then we have a wall. Hold on, let me put on my contacts. Oh, that's different. So here we have an absolute abstraction. Interesting lines and colors and lightings and shapes and such. We have a human figure in this, or at least what looks like a human figure. And that's a really interesting addition to this, because without this, it could run the risk of really just becoming an abstract mess. I mean, with absolutely no context. In this case, partially from kind of the metal textures that you see, but predominantly, and kind of neon-ish lighting, but predominantly it's the human figure that places this in an urban, potentially urban or at least built environment, some sort of context. Can't emphasize enough how helpful the human figure is here to pull this photo together and make sense of it. But you can see that, this is a good example of how shutter drag can really be pushed to an absurd degree, and you can use some really interesting techniques where you're taking your camera and you're just like, and you end up with something that looks like this. And if you do it cleverly, you can end up with something that's kind of cool. Next, we have this one, and this is a great example of using shutter drag to follow a subject through the scene. So we have the subject sharp, we have the background and some of the foreground going by. So here we get a sense, once again, of the energy, but also that we're moving through an area. And that's fun. Moving is fun. Moving is tight. I like moving. So I love this. This takes what is a rather cluttered environment. There's a lot going on here. It's an interesting environment. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot happening. There's a lot of people. There's a motorbike in the foreground. It takes all of these elements that could really confuse the image, confuse what the subject is, and makes all of that into a nice flowing texture. It allows all of those things to become really helpful for the image in terms of context, in terms of energy, in terms of, like I said, that sense of movement. And we focus in directly on a single subject. And by a single subject, I mean the two people in the car. This is a very clever and well done photo. I am curious how slow the shutter speed is for this, because that guy could not have been moving that fast through this scene that the photographer, I mean, it's not a Formula One racer, so what is the shutter speed? There's a point where your shutter speed can get so slow that even if you're tracking with somebody, you could start to become blurry as well, because you have natural hand motion, and so this is really well done technically. And finally, we have this photo, and this is a masterful photograph. I love this. We have beautiful lighting, beautiful punchy colors. We have layering. We have multiple subjects in the frame. We have a ton of context happening here. And then of course we have this car coming through the frame. But we have the second subject in the background framed in the car, which is moving through. This I love the green and yellow as well. Very exciting. We have a rather deep depth of field here, so I'm going to guess this was taken around f9 or so. And if everything in this photo was sharp, if there was no motion blur, then you could potentially have a lot of things competing here. There are people inside of this vehicle, or at least I hope there are. I think I can see some arms and some red pants there. If they were sharp, and if the vehicle and all the parts of it were sharp, it could make for a rather confused photo. So you can see how much it helps out here. Now the photographer, I think, really dropped the ball though, because they could have layered 2 or 3 cars on top of each other, but they only layered 1. I mean, are you even trying to slay the Instagram game if you're only layering 1 motion blurred car with a person framed inside of it? Something to think about. This photo is insane. It's unique. I've never seen a photo quite like this before. But all of these photos today have been fantastic. But that's it for this one. I would love to hear any thoughts you have, any thoughts about any of these photos, something that you think I may have missed. Let's chat. One of the big reasons why I make these videos, and it's meant to be sort of an undertone, is to inspire us to go out and shoot. When I'm gathering photos for these videos, that's what happens. So I hope that is something that happens for you guys, as well as learning how to do things and whatnot. Always remember, when you're out shooting, photos that are spectacular are not going to come every time. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of practice and discipline. With all of that said, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to hit the like button. I would really appreciate that. And if you like what I'm up to around here, if you want to hit the subscribe button, I would appreciate that as well. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. Have a good day. Goodbye. I'm going to drink my lukewarm tea.